When I say doing customer experience right, what does that mean to you?
If you were a CEO, it's like, do you have the attitude that your people work for you or do you work for them?
What does that mean to you when you say the world is changing professionally?
The economy and the world is going to be a much more chaotic as a whole. The more connected we get, the more all these swings, one thing in the world happens and affects the other part of the world.
What is the best leadership advice you've received or given? Hello, Aaron Ross. Welcome to the DoingCXRight show.
Hey, Stacy. Thanks for the invitation.
Oh, I love your content on social media. I love your books. I love so much of what you're doing. So it is a gift to the listeners to have you here, and soon they will understand why. But to start off, Aaron, who are you? What do you do for a living?
You think sometimes that's a bit of it's not that hard a question to answer, but it is a bit of a struggle right now doing a few things. So ultimately, though, I see myself as more of an author and partner. So I like writing books. I'm working on some new books. I like partnering with people. So I've got some business partnerships. And, I think most people know me for my sales books, growth books, right? There's Predictable Revenue, which has been, a bestseller. It's really, especially in like the SaaS sales worlds. And From Impossible to Inevitable, right? The books show up on lots of, top 10, top 20 startup sales, this, that, and the other book lists. And I'm still continuing now to kind of explore ideas in those areas, some new ones, because the world's changing a lot, and we can get into that. But I'm also adding in some new books and talks on some areas. I'm not sure. There's some things start off as a talk, and I think will turn into a book. Not sure. And sometimes it starts as a book. So there's a book I'm working on called Income Operating System, which is really for individuals. How do you, make more money? There's a book called Eat, Shit, and Grow, which is more like just intense, unique, or weird stories from the inside of. We have 10 children, so between there's just the money side, the emotional side, the weird stuff side, and that's be more of like I don't know how to describe that book, but just things you may not have expected to hear about, life and things like that. And there's a new talk I've got, which is tentatively called Predictable Revenue in an Unpredictable World. And that could be its own different book. So I mean, it's not an inflection point. I've been transitioning from really totally focused on sales books and sales consulting and things and having a big family to going some different directions. So, so I'm like, I don't know how to answer that question, but there you go.
Yeah, that's okay. I get it. And you said the world is changing. It really is. What does that mean to you when you say the world is changing professionally?
Well, to be fair, like it's always been changing ever since, forever, and it always will. But if, I think different times there feels like, or especially in certain industries, that change picks up, or there's more of a disruption. There was a month or 2 months ago ish. I was talking to a variety of sales leaders, CEOs across, different countries too, whether South America, I do a lot in Brazil, but the States and Europe. And someone captured it really well. They said, this was a VP of sales of some SaaS company. I'm a little bit terrified at how fast things are changing, right? And that was something I picked up on from a lot of people because there's overall, especially in the SaaS world, and the SaaS often is a bellwether for lots of other industries. It kind of leads the charge in so many ways. But a lot of marketing techniques aren't working as well as they used to. A lot of sales techniques, outbound techniques aren't working as well as they used to. There's usually higher churn, so customers who are leaving when you didn't expect them to, or downgrading. So there is a bit of a slowdown, or has been in the software world, in the economy. But that will turn around. But there's a lot of other bigger trends at play that are not going to turn around. That there's a permanent change to, there's these trends which were happening over the past. I've seen this for 20 years, man. I worked at Salesforce.com in the early days, which is where a lot of my early work was based off of, in creating predictable sales systems and kind of engineering growth. But now something's with AI. Well, actually, it's COVID first, and then the cost of living crisis, and then AI on top of it. Like these, and there's this generational change. So there's these bunch of these kind of mega trends that together are just like putting the vice on people. And that's what that shows up as are things again like buyers tend to be a bit more stressed and anxious. The burden of all the this is sell and buyers. There's more of like this burden that people are carrying, so they have less time and energy, more like an emotional energy to kind of make better decisions. So things are a bit more rushed. There's shorter attention spans. There's more choice. There's more overwhelm. All this combined is things are already hard. And now is next month the month I'm going to be obsoleted by some AI thing? So that's a bit of like everyone's feeling like, what is going on? Like, how are we going to grow or change or get out of this? And nothing we've been trying is working.
So, on that note, because I feel it too, everybody's feeling this new anxiousness. It's hard to
The pressure.
describe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, two things. One, I love that you have written and spent time focused on predictability because we live in a world that's so hard to predict, especially in business. So, based on that, let me ask you two questions. First of all, this is the Doing Customer Experience Right show. So, when I say doing customer experience right, what does that mean to you? And let's then talk about predictability.
Customer experience, right? There's to me like the classic stereotype, which is someone's on a web page, someone's on an app page. I mean, it could be a screwdriver, right? There's some products you're creating and you're really, you're reinventing whatever it is. You're coming up with some creative way to really make it awesome for that customer. Yes. And a lot of companies, like the amount of time and attention that it takes to really get that right, I think is far more than most entrepreneurs and executives realize. And I don't know that I've ever done that. Like the things I've really done have I would say kind of, I've created this sales team. So my customers, I'll go back, my customers were my salespeople and the salesforce.com, right? So the time and attention it took me to kind of build the system and like really dial it in and then writing books. Um, but then I've been on board to consult with lots of companies. And I think that, with the busyness, there's this, not only the busyness, and I think it's mostly the American culture, kind of UK, and it's a little bit of the tech culture. It's spreading across countries now, social media. So there's this like impatience, urgency, but it's more of an impatience, not urgency. And splitting the attention and like, I'm going to try to do everything. And also there feels like there's more obligations. So it's a lot more challenging, I find, for people to say, I really want to dial this in and get this product experience really tight for the customers because it just takes longer than you want. You feel like you're never done. And then you get something figured out and there's like some prize or some change. So I think that's where I see that. And the flip side, again, I mentioned the sales process, and you could call it marketing, go to market, but like the sales process and the marketing process is its own customer experience. And it's tricky to kind of spend the time to really try to get that right. Again, because all these competing demands for attention, and there's so many types of customers, it feels overwhelming. It's like it's so easy, and sometimes it's the right thing to just get it good enough, but not great. And it's really hard to get it great. And I'm not saying I know how to do that, but I just see the challenges. It's one thing to say, hey, let's create an amazing experience, but to actually do that it's just way harder than anyone realizes. It's hard.
I agree. It is hard, yet it's not. Because in my field, we do experience design. We bring people from all different parts of the company, HR, marketing, legal, care. We bring them to the table and literally map out the customer journey the way that it is today. But then you go validate it with real customers. Is it how they want it to be? And then you fix the gaps. So I think that it is hard, yet companies overcomplicate it. And
Yeah, that I think that's for sure. Yeah.
but there's something you said that also I want to make sure
Actually,
yeah,
give you one example.
yeah.
Someone will sit there and send 20 texts back and forth versus picking up the phone and calling the person for 3 minutes, right? So I think that is the same as you know, trying to get a few different people from different fields together to look at this feels like, wow, that's a big project, but it actually ends up being a lot more efficient than trying to do it in bits and pieces where I do this phone call and I do this thing and you just kind of string yourself along forever.
Yeah. I mean, we absolutely make it complicated.
There's simple, versus simple is different than easy, right? The idea of like, how do you get healthier? Well, it's simple. You just exercise, eat vegetables, and get some sleep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll just that. That's all.
Yes.
Sure. Manage your
Yes.
stress. Oh, okay.
It it's true. I mean, it's also easier to give other people advice than take our own, but
I don't know
that's
what you're
another
talking about.
story.
Ah,
That's a different day.
yeah.
Yes. So I want to emphasize something you said, which was also the internal team. The internal team is also your customer when you're in business units and serving different teams. So that is really good, what you mentioned before.
Yeah. Technically, everyone is your customer. If you want to take it to the nth degree, which, everyone's your customer. If you were a CEO, it's like, do you have the attitude that your people work for you or do you work for them? Right. And I mean, honestly, there's not one answer. I'm sure there's lots of CEOs who have everyone works for me and that works for them. I'm a bit of the opposite side, which is more the servant leader. It worked really well for me at Salesforce. I just go back to that where, I was there to help them be successful. They're my customers and the sales. So there is like my team doing prospecting and, they were my customers and the salespeople that were getting meetings for my customers and my team's customers. And it's but kind of look at these layers of customer to customer to customer, it helps just everything flow better versus the mentality sometimes of here's this job. You just need to do what I tell you to do, which to be fair, like sometimes that might make sense, right? I have 10 children and sometimes like you just need to do the dishes. I don't know, just do the job. And then sometimes though, overall, you want to keep thinking about, how can we create more flow through this in a bigger picture?
In customer centric companies that I've worked at over the 25 years, the key to that is people feeling responsible versus accountable. Responsible is where they're just focused on their task and they do the job, but the accountability is feeling that ownership to make sure that the customer experience is really superb. I think there's a big difference between those.
I think it's in the From Impossible to Inevitable book, we had a section that was basically, do your employees are they renting or owning their jobs? And I think if you do, if you're renting a car, how do you treat it? Versus if you own your car, how do you treat it? Well, I mean, some people trash their cars, but actually, some people might treat rental cars better than their own car, I guess, because they have to return it. But the principle is, you know, you borrow. I'm just here to make some money, and I don't really care. I don't. My heart's not in it. I don't have. I think accountability. But the ownership, and versus, yeah, or I'm just showing up and getting paid. Versus actually, I feel some sort of ownership. This is kind of a bit of my baby in some way. But let's say there's lots of business owners and executives who have this thing like, why aren't my people working as hard as me? And I think this is an old model anyway. It's like, okay, especially for an owner, like, why would your people work as hard as you? You own the business. What's right? You own it emotionally and you own it financially, and you're not sharing much of it with your employees. So why would they work as hard as you? That's a silly expectation. Or you hire lots of people who have no boundaries, and so they will work as hard as you without the same kind of reward.
Yes. Predictability. Let's go back to that.
Good try, but I think that's kind of gone out the window now for the future.
I don't know. Let's examine that. There is AI now that will actually look at customer feedback and be able to say what consumers will do next based on certain actions they've taken. I think the data is actually better to be able to predict. What is your view on that?
Yeah, to be fair, some things will be like people, when you have large groups of people are quite predictable as a whole. Yeah, I've seen this, I think back, like a lot of the sales work I did, it was doing outbound prospecting, which is, engaging people who don't know me. And I'd knocked on doors before when I was younger. And what you see is there actually are very repeatable ways that people respond to the things you say. And I'll give you an example. I called it a mapping call. I got to go back in my memory here for a second. And so I call up a company, could be big or small, get a human, because you got to get a human. little trickier these days, but, and let me think, say, hey, I think, what was the opening phrase? Hey, I'm just a bit lost. Can you help me out? Right. So in that case, what they always say is, sure, like with what? But if I'd said, hey, this is Aaron from Salesforce.com, and I'm trying to find someone in, a bit longer explanation, then they have a different response that you don't know. But if you just say, hey, I'm a bit lost, can you help me out? Of course, what is people, they always say, okay, well, yeah, with what? So that's very simple. And of course, with all like Amazon and e-commerce. But here's the thing, in the short term, it's predictable. However, humans, this is where like predictability, I think to me, the economy and the world is going to be a much more chaotic as a whole. The more connected we get, the more all these swings, one thing in the world happens and affects the other part of the world. Kind of like the stock market and the U.S. stock market. If you look at the past, there's sometimes big depressions, but in general, is a lot less. I don't remember what the term is. For the volatility, it was a lot less volatile. Yeah, so the volatility is going to continue. I call it chaos. I know. I just think it's a cooler word, honestly. There'll be more volatility in the world because when we're connected, things are moving faster. So how do you? I think it's not so much in the future. It's not as a business, as a person, not for yourself and for your business, creating predictability, but maybe creating like durability, because you don't know what's going to happen next, right? There's going to be a crash. You don't know what year. There's going to be stuff. There might be another pandemic. You don't know. There's going to be stuff more often than not. Another war. Who knows? You don't know. So you can't really be prepared because you don't really know what's going to happen. In California, you can prepare for an earthquake. People have kind of forgotten. I grew up there in the 70s, 80s, and like there's 90s. You can prepare for an earthquake to some extent. Water as a person, water, food, shelter, so on. But now, to business, how are you ready? I mean, you can't really be prepared for the things you don't know are going to happen, but you have to be ready. When something happens, just be like, okay, what's this thing? How do we deal with it? Do we adjust? Do we do what this, that, and the other? And I think that that's kind of like a big premise. And in some places, especially with AI, so much stuff is going to change. AI kills techniques faster than ever. So going back to predictability, yes, for sometimes we're predictable, but what happens is humans in our society is also emergent or it habituates. So as soon as we get used to something like, okay, so for there's a few years back on Facebook or Instagram, there were like a lot of ads that went by where they had like these, there's always something that's working, like moving faces, right? And works amazing. People are buying, and then suddenly everyone's using these certain types of ads because they're working, but then everyone gets used to it, so they stop working. So it's just, you got to be kind of thoughtful about some places you can have some predictability. Will that last or not? And for how long? Because things are picking up. You never know. It's kind of like with Google, right? Great. We're having all these like predictable, like our organic growth is going up. Our SEO is amazing. And then Google changed the algorithm. You got to go back and readapt. So that's just going to keep, I don't see that slowing down. I only think that's going to pick up the pace of those kinds of changes, or the way any of the social algorithms work. Just that's the new world, ever increasing volatility. So how do you deal with that?
Right. So, what can people listening to this, what are some tactics that they can do with the ability, the tools, the knowledge today? One example I know for sure is that, going back to the voice of customer insights, that if someone says legal and they're talking to a customer service rep or in the chat, the company would want to know that key word was said so that they can legal lawsuit, right? You want to know that right away so that you can act on that.
One of these new talks I'm working on, I mentioned at the beginning, predictable revenue in an unpredictable world, and that name will change, but it's just like a working thing is. So the basis is kind of what I just said, right? There's all this volatility. But one thing I know, regardless of what happens with technology and volatility, is that relationships will always cut through the noise. And in fact, if there's big changes, just like back when COVID hit, if you're a business and you have good relationships with your team and with your market, you're going to have a lot more slack and leeway to kind of get things wrong mess up and so on, fix things and to adapt. Also, no matter what happens with AI, like if you have every market's getting more crowded with more copycats and more just noise. So relationships can take a lot of forms in this talk. So that I'll just rattle off a few of them. And I'm still developing this, but for example, again, I mentioned, don't forget about your relationship if you're a leader with your internal team. What's your culture like? Culture is a word that's so common, it's almost loses its meaning. But I mean, is there some sort of like trust, or is there a bond or not, or is it just purely transactional? So if there's some problem, or if one of your employees got a better offer by 20%, would they just immediately take it because they just can't wait to get out, or would they have to really think about it because they enjoy what's going on with your team? There's no right answer. Like sometimes you have contractors and you don't really care, and that's not the point of what you're focused on. You're focused on something else. But I would say that how the leaders treat their team is going to be a reflection of also how the team treats the customers, right? Let's say if you have just an asshole of a sales leader, what do you think the chances are that the salespeople are going to be, kind of caring and confident with the customers and not anxious at all? They pay it forward. So so one place is your internal relationships with your people. Another is the relationships between your salespeople, if you have them with customers. Another could be you to your market. A great way there's lots of ways to do it to strengthen a relationship with a market is to publish, which is more popular now, founder-led content, or just content of any kind. Could be written, could be video, could be audio, right? It could be this. People get to know you. They know your business. They know you. They know things you're interested in. They know some of your challenges. So another part of this is the more as people kind of open up to share more of their non-business side. It could be their challenges, their interests, their hobbies. Again, that could be other ways to connect with your audience. So there's a lot of ways to do it. There's more SaaS companies investing in community or partners and ecosystem, right? So rather than just, outbound marketing, outbound prospecting. So relationships, trust, alignment. Um, do customers, if they really appreciate your product because of the value they get, but they also appreciate the relationship, then they're more likely, of course, to stay, to be a referral source, to recommend you, to maybe even upsell. So
Yeah. Yeah. When you talk about predictability, another thing I find valuable that people don't do enough of is when they ask their customer, are you satisfied? Or I don't even like satisfied. Are you
yeah,
delighted? Are you
on a scale of
happy?
1 to 10.
Right. Okay. So let's say they say 9 or 10. They love you. They love your brand. And then companies say, thank you. That's it. Nothing, they do nothing with it instead of activating those promoters to say, would you refer? Here's a way. Like
Yeah,
that's
could be that, or capture a testimonial or quote or
yes.
something. Yeah,
Talk about
yeah,
predictability. That is a good high chance that you'll get more customers from your existing ones.
yeah. So I think the world is just only going to get more and more complicated because there's more and more opportunities, and so it's like you need to be able to, there's so many ways you can grow a business, right? So this is one of them. And I think this is where in the past for a long time, and I helped create this monster. Um, there's many, but all the tech companies, it's like outbound prospecting and inbound marketing, and there's all these go-to-market, these scalable, repeatable ways to generate leads and to sell and so on. And those will still work, but there's going to be a bit of a rebalancing where we're already seeing it. A lot of companies are going back to sending, physical pieces of mail in a more regular way, or going field sales, like going back to people, everyone was going to virtual work before, and now there's continuing a rebalancing of people who are doing inside sales or doing field sales and back into the field and back out on the road and traveling again. There's my co-author on the From Impossible to Inevitable book is a guy named Jason Lemkin. He started SaaStr, which is the top SaaS community. He'd started a company called EchoSign, sold to Adobe. But he said when he had EchoSign, He and no customer he ever visited in person, including getting on planes, none of them ever attrited.
Huh.
Take that what you
What's
will.
Yeah, what's old is new again, I think.
I know, yeah. It's true. It's like 70s fashion, although I hope, I never it's like you see fashions come back around every 20 years, and so the old school. Yeah, I think, there's a lot of digital, I said there's younger buyers and sellers, and there's a lot of digital first. Um, but I think in the expectations of people are going up in terms of if we're going to connect and talk, we want a better, I hate the term value exchange, but to get more out of each other versus just going through the motions of how much show up and do my demo and you just listen and blah, blah, blah. And people just want a better experience on both ends,
Absolutely.
better CX.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You got to do CX right. And so, as we're coming to the end, rapid fire questions for you. We talked about leadership. What is the best leadership advice you've received or given?
I don't know if I mean, what I've been saying, and I think what I've been working on for quite a long time is, I'm still looking for a good label, but I've been calling in my mind, like in talks, like creating a culture of caring challenge or caring. And I think it's this balance between actually practicing changing your emotional state to caring about someone, right? And what that means is, for example, if I'm a sales leader, I can care about my people hitting their number, but really I'm trying to help them do it, but really I'm trying to help myself hit my number. I don't care about them, I actually just care about me. That's different than wanting them to hit their number because I care about them and I want them to succeed too, and I will as well. But it's not necessarily a change in the way of what you say, what you do. It's a change in how your management style feels to the person you're working with, and they can tell if you care or not, and they will reciprocate. Like if you treat them, if they know that you're just a cog in their machine, they're not really going to care much about you in return at the company. I've been there. Most people have been there. Most people have at least had managers where they knew they didn't care about them. I think some lucky people have had managers where they felt cared about, or by the company. But having said that, caring also means that if someone's not doing their best, you challenge them. Like they need to be challenged in some way. And so sometimes caring about someone means that you're going to help them find a different job or leave the company or have a tough conversation that they don't want to have. So caring does not mean, avoidant. So that's where I've been going, my go-to these days.
Absolutely. And that is very much helpful in predicting loyalty, predicting whether people stay or not.
Yeah, if that's
Um,
important to you. And so maybe most people it is. Some businesses probably don't care, honestly.
so, last two questions with a minute left. If you could go back in time to your younger 20-year-old self, based on what you know now that you didn't know then, what would you tell younger Aaron?
That's a hard one. But yeah, it's because it's hard to imagine not going through all the stuff I did to be who I am. But I'd say really pay more attention to my interests and hobbies, and to really work on those and develop them more, and don't lose sight of them. Those are going to be more and more important, not just for my personal life, but also professional as I get older, and for everyone, other people. That's part of the future success as I see it.
Absolutely. And what is the one takeaway you want people to remember today?
It never gets old saying, like, this stuff just takes way longer than you want, and just the bar is always moving. So no matter where you think you get it to, there's always another place, and just keep plugging away. As soon as you get it right, then things change. You got to redo it. And that's just the way the game is played.
Yes. And I would add, have experience, designing experiences really intentionally, not just by accident, but really design it, because that's what makes people feel cared for, feel valued, want to pay you, want to stay with you, and so much more.
Yeah, the design, and then keep getting that feedback, because it takes a lot of iterations
Oh,
to,
yeah.
to get it right. And no one, you
Absolutely.
can't whiteboard your way, you can't, to success.
No. Well, thank you for being here. I
Yeah, thanks,
appreciate
Stacy.
you. And I will put in the show notes all the information to reach you and read your books. And thank you again.
Great.